Hi, I'm David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. Ambassador Wisner, thank you so much for joining us here at the Tennessean. We appreciate you making the trip here and making also the opportunity to educate the public and inform the public on issues related to U.S.-Iran relations. This is the topic of an op-ed you just wrote over the weekend, and it's going to be the focus of our conversation for tonight. Thank you very much again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for receiving me. It was a pleasure, and the subject is of moment. We are faced with an uncommon series of challenges abroad, but among the most vexing is what we face in the Middle East. And you can't see any way forward in the Middle East without taking Iran into account.
Now, one of the things that I hear often in news coverage is, because of some of the president's statements as well as other statements, is was this a good deal?
The president has argued it was not a good deal. In fact, he calls it the worst, though he's never really articulated what is wrong with the deal. So, struggling to do at least that, I listened very carefully a week ago in Munich to Bibi Netanyahu, and he cited three reasons to have reservations about the deal. The first reservation is that the deal expires in 10 years. That happens to be garbage, because while in one sense Iran becomes a normal nation after 10 years, it still is bound by the additional protocol and the most intense inspection regime ever instituted for a nuclear power. So the fact that Iran can break out in some manner without us knowing it is inconceivable, and flies in the face of the commitments that we now know. After 3 years of full implementation of the deal, there isn't a single indication the Iranians have violated the trust that was put in them to comply with the deal. The second reason that the Prime Minister of Israel cited was that the deal did not permit the inspection of military facilities, and that is, of course, not true either. It foresees the visit of military facilities, which, first of all, are under IAEA observation, electronic observation. But as is the case with even inspections in this country of military facilities for other arms control agreements, there is an alert period that has to be gone through. And if the nation that has been requested doesn't comply, in this case Iran, then you can call a material breach in the agreement. We've not had this problem. The idea that somehow there is somewhere a secret cave that trolls are creating nuclear weapons is farcical. Iran is probably the most spied upon, overseen, examined country in the world. To dig create a secret nuclear facility is unobserved, is almost unimaginable. So the third reason that Netanyahu cited as to the flaw in the deal was that the deal did not cover missiles. And here he's absolutely right. It doesn't cover missiles, but that was by design. Those who negotiated the deal, those who saw it through, not only the American negotiators, British, French, German, Russian, Chinese, realized that if you tried to lay on top of the nuclear deal, already complex enough, a set of understandings about missiles, you never would have reached an end of the day. And the most dangerous single element, the nuclear element, would have gone unresolved. So the missile issue was left, as are regional disputes with Iran, left for further negotiations. So I'm prepared to push all of them aside. And if I credit the president's concerns, it's less about the deal itself than the fact that Iran has pushed the envelope in the Middle East. That's not the deal. And to not certify the deal because the Iranians are causing you concern in a different field makes no sense to me. In fact, and I go on for one more step, I cannot imagine us leaving this deal, the nuclear deal, unilaterally, and leaving our allies in Europe high and dry, and the Russians and Chinese, who we mobilized to get a deal. What a triumph of American diplomacy. But having said that, this, I think, subject to being corrected, will be the first time in our history that we've walked out of an international understanding that we were party to, unilaterally. That has huge implications.
Mm-hmm.
What trust, therefore, is there in any arrangement made by the United States if we unilaterally walk away from solemn undertakings?
You'd mentioned in your op-ed related to this, you wrote, such action would gravely damage America's standing in the world. European allies are openly opposed to Trump's threatened action and are working to prevent his taking a step that would put the U.S. in violation of the agreement. Do you think they can be successful?
The Europeans can be successful in restraining us?
Yes.
Not unless the administration's position right now is, as articulated by John Sullivan, the Deputy Secretary of State last week in Munich, well, we'd like to see the JCPOA's restrictions, but we want the Europeans to agree with us, so we have to work to improve the deal.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't agree, because they can't figure out how to do this, then I don't know where we're going to be in May. Where the Europeans have shown some indication of sympathy with our view is over missiles and how to get now to move on to another issue, missiles. The Iranians have missiles that fire 2,000 kilometers. That's a threat to Israel. It isn't a threat to the United States, by the way. It's a threat to Israel, threat to Saudi Arabia, theoretically. But it's more complex. You can't just say the Iranians can't have missiles. Iran has no air force. So Iran's own conception of its national defense is a deterrence. In the absence of an air force, the missile is the Iranian way of warning nations armed with huge numbers of conventional air force aircraft. Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, to mention the principal ones, not to mention our deployments in the region. Stay away because we can actually reach you. We don't know the accuracy of Iranian missiles yet, but it doesn't mean that they in themselves are a danger. It means that if you're going to try to control Iranian missiles and constrain them, you're going to have to do it through a negotiation over the security of the region. So my defense is not an invitation to your attack. And there has to be then a generalized set of understandings that reduces the overall threat level, not just cause one party to disarm. Make sense?
Now, your career, you've had a tremendously extensive career and distinguished career as a diplomat, and today we're in the age, the 21st century, that includes Twitter as a potential form of diplomacy. What does that do to strengthen, bolster, or destabilize it? Because I remember during the Obama era, you had several members of the State Department who were using it to inform people about what was happening in a certain consulate, but today we're seeing foreign policy potentially being dictated by a tweet.
Well, you see, I think I probably don't agree with that, but then I also consider myself something of a Neanderthal when it comes to modern social media. I think we're confusing substance with form. Twitter is a high-speed way of communicating a message, but what's the message? If you have no consistent strategy, then you can send it by parcel post or you can send it by Twitter. One will get there faster than the other. What you have to face is, what the issue is not Twitter, it's is there a conception, is there a strategic conception behind the messaging, be it Twitter or newspaper or press conference or whatever it is. And here we are allowing ourselves to let form triumph over substance. The problem I have with American foreign policy today is the absence of strategy. Secretary of State announces he has a strategy for Syria that leaves 2,000 Americans stranded in northeastern Syria, supposedly to finish up the job with ISIS, and, quote, to check Iran's passage from east to west, as if there's some sort of super highway that one sits on. Iranians go from east to west by airplane, like most people do. There isn't a super highway. So why are they there? And what are the dangers they will run? And what objectives are we setting for them to accomplish? And under what terms and conditions would they be withdrawn after you achieve what outcomes? It's that context that I find is missing, and therefore the strategic dilemma we face is not the speed. Now, where Twitter acquires its own destabilizing effect is in the hands that diplomacy and national statecraft does depend on coherence and consistency. So you're looking, nations relate to other nations on the basis of what they understand their policies are. If you have Twitter and you use that Twitter to send a different signal every several hours, then your audience is totally confused about what you're doing. Now, what are they going to do in response? Sit there and fire back a bunch of Twitters? That, I guess, is one option. To gird their loins because they don't know what you're going to do, they better plan for the worst. That's not off the table. Pay no attention to you? That's perhaps even worse, because they don't believe your Twitter of this hour is going to be followed by denying Twitter the next hour. So the instrument of Twitter at this point does become substantive. It leaves, as badly used Twitter becomes substantive, it then sends a destabilizing signal. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's very interesting. One of your assignments before was as ambassador to the Philippines.
Yes.
And currently you have President Duterte.
Yes,
who
I know
is
him.
Far different than other presidents in the past, or maybe not. And I'd love to have your sense of, where's the Philippines going? Obviously, the President of the United States has complimented him publicly and has certainly referenced him in a more positive light than he's usually cast related to his war on
Drugs.
drug dealer and drugs. What is your sense of what's going on? Because it used to be that the Philippines and the United States have a very close relationship with its naval base, and obviously it's more than
no longer
central.
naval bases. Those ended.
Yeah.
The end of the base period in the early 90s, I actually presided over the
Oh, is that right?
bringing down the flag. Subic,
And Clark.
Clark Air Base, Air Station.
Mount Pinatubo put the nail in the coffin.
I also brought the flag down at Pinatubo, at Clark, so I remember that, and a number of other facilities. Look, the Philippines has lagged in recent decades the rest of Southeast Asia economically in terms of its investment in infrastructure, education, public health. The general welfare of Filipinos has declined until arguably 7-8 years ago, and then the Filipinos managed to get on top of a growth curve, and they have been registering quite credible rates of growth. And Southeast Asia slowed down a bit, so you've seen a bit of an evening. The welfare of the Philippines, in broad terms, has gone up. The Philippines has been a constant scene of strife from ancient Hak rebels in Luzon to communists in Central Islands to Muslim rebels way down in the south. Yeah, the Muslim rebels are still a serious matter. The battle for Marawi this year was quite brutal. But generally the security of the islands have improved measurably. This then leaves the politics, and we still have the post-Marcos world of very short-term Philippine presidencies. They get one term in office. So if you like Duterte, you can regret the fact he's going to leave. If you don't like him, you know he's going to leave. So I don't think he's the final Philippine president. The greater problem is that the Philippines has not elected a really world-class president. My father might have argued that Magsaysay was, but you have to push the envelope a bit hard even for that one. Marcos had the makings of one and then abused it. So we don't know what's going to come after Duterte. But the Philippines is not particularly well governed, but its system reflects the nature of the islands. There are thousands of islands and hundreds of dialects, and the sort of make-do politics of the Philippines probably serves a better model to hold it together. No, you can't imagine an authoritarian president who could bind it up and make it all function. The trains all run on, whatever trains there are, run on time. I am no fan of the brutalities committed in the name of law and order. I recognize the intense sensitivity of Filipinos overall about the drug issue. It has been devastating in the country, and Duterte has reflected a kind of societal angst about that. At the same time, Filipinos are good people, and shooting people down without warrant or releasing vigilante groups or whatever is the description, it doesn't go down well. And I think you've seen in the last year or so a serious tapering off of these judicial abuses, extrajudicial abuses. My guess is that the next president of the Philippines will be back more in mainstream, a bit of the movie actor and some public skills.
It was Ramos, wasn't it?
Well, Ramos was much earlier, but you had Estrada, who was straight out of was a Law and Order cop in a movie series. Then you had Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who was a crook, and then the Filipinos elected Aquino, the son of the murdered Aquino, and he did a reasonably good job. Wouldn't say he was a great statesman, but he did a good job. We can look forward to another Aquino.
Well, returning to Iran for a moment, looking at the last 4 presidents that Iran has had, they've all had the reputation of being tremendously reactionary or perhaps more moderate, from Rafsanjani, Khatami, Ahmadinejad, and Rouhani, now since 2013. Has that leadership helped, could you talk a little about how that has helped guide U.S.-Iran relations over this time and how it led us to getting the Iran nuclear deal?
I have an overall view that I hold to very strongly, and that is, it is in the interests of the United States to deal with Iran with the government that's in power, not to try to second-guess Iranian politics and base our policies on what goes on inside of Iran. So while I find it absolutely fascinating to see the ins and outs of Ahmadinejad or Rouhani or Khatami or one of the others, what I'm looking for is Iranian state policy and how I can relate to that. Now, unless your policy is regime change, and then the regime in place is the one you want to get rid of, there are Americans who hanker after that outcome, even though as formal declaration of state intention, we've ceased doing that. I know there are a lot of people who believe somehow El Dorado would follow the fall of the Islamic Republic. We all live in a land of reason and light. Nothing could be worse than the Islamic Republic. Oh, I've never been persuaded of that. As I look around the Middle East, in the absence of a stable government, what do you get? Another stable government? Not on your life. You get chaos, and then you get violence, and then you get uncontrolled situations that are not cannot be molded by external or even any kind of action. So that's a kind of strongly held view. What is going on in Iran is pretty hard for us to judge. And that is because since 1979, the United States and Iran have had no relationship. We have no students and professors traveling, newsmen travel only incidentally. We have no embassy, we have no official contact with the country. We have to live on what we pick up is crumbs off other people's tables. So a hard, serious assessment of what's going on in Iran eludes us. What we do know is there is a genuine desire of Iranians in general, the elite in particular, and the masses in the countryside and in the poorer urban areas in particular, for a different future. Different people want different outcomes. Those who live in the countryside and in poorer urban areas want a better economic deal and don't think it's coming fast enough, and just demonstrated in an anomic way around the country their own discontent. The middle class and above want a different deal. It's less economic than it is different political deal. They want more liberties, more civil rights, and they have gradually inching in that direction against a regime that is constituted, defined by the clerical. They're not all clerics by any means. Plenty of non-clerics. The IRGC is Iranian Revolutionary Guards are non-clerics, but the controlling police, intelligence institutions, the core instruments, the conservative business groups are all people holding back change. There are a number of things that have been written that give you insights, but I think the general pressure of history moves Iran, and what worries the supreme leader, as I understand it from all those, is that at some point the Islamic Republic, with this odd structure of religious leaders and popular elections, won't survive. That is keeps him up at night. But where we are, how long is the arc of Iranian history? It is very, very hard for us with so little information to determine.
Well, Ambassador, I want to thank you so much for your time here at the Tennessean, and look forward to having more discussion at the Belmont event tonight.
Thank you very much for receiving me today and letting me go on for so long.
We're here to hear from you.